The water was supposed to bring life. Instead, it brought silence. Now, only a miracle and a needle can stop the dying. By noon, the savanna had lost its voice. The wind still moved through the pale yellow grass. Heat still rose from the ground in trembling waves. Insects still clicked inside the thorn scrub, and far away, a lilac-breasted roller flashed blue across the hard white sky. But beside the waterhole, there was no rhythm of drinking, no heavy paws pressing into mud, no low warning growls, no cubs tumbling over one another in the dust. Only bodies. A lion pride lay scattered around the shallow pool as if sleep had taken them all at once. One adult male rested on his side beneath the broken shade of an acacia. Two lionesses lay closer to the water, their flanks rising too slowly, then not at all. The ground around them was trampled with the confused marks of panic. And near the edge of the pool, a lioness with one clouded blue-white eye stood trembling. Her good eye was amber. Her other eye, damaged long ago by infection, held the color of faded moonlight. The rangers who had watched this pride from a distance knew her by that mark. They called her Blue Eye, not because she was gentle, not because she belonged to them, but because in the open grass, even through binoculars, she was impossible to mistake. Blue Eye had survived drought, hyena pressure, failed hunts, and the long hunger season when every rib showed beneath the skin of the plains. But this was different. This enemy had no scent she understood. It had waited inside the water. She lowered her head and nudged a cub lying in the dust. The cub's small body shifted under the pressure of her nose, but did not rise. Blue Eye paused. Her ears twitched. A thin string of saliva hung from her mouth. Her legs shook beneath her. Then she moved to the next cub. That one stirred, barely. A paw flexed against the dirt. Tiny jaw opened. No sound came out. In the wild, survival usually announces itself. A chase, a wound, a storm, a fight. But some dangers arrive quietly, wearing the shape of something needed. The waterhole had been low for weeks. Cattle had passed nearby in the mornings. Lions had come at night. People had argued at the border of the reserve, where fences were weak and tempers were weaker. To the farmer whose goats had been taken, the pride had become a threat. To the pride, the water was simply water. By the time the first rangers saw the circling vultures, the sun was already high enough to flatten every shadow. A patrol vehicle stopped on a rise almost half a mile away. Dust drifted around its tires. Inside, Ranger Maravas lifted her binoculars and went still. At first, her mind refused the shape of what she saw. A pride did not sleep like that in open heat. Not so close to water. Not with vultures already dropping lower. She counted once. Then again. Her hand reached for the radio. Something was wrong at the well. And on the far side of the shimmering grass, Blue Eye swayed over the last two moving cubs, too weak to carry them, too frightened to leave them, and too poisoned to understand that help was coming. Mara had seen lion injuries before. Snare wounds, broken teeth, torn shoulders from buffalo horns, cubs abandoned after a pride split, old males pushed out by younger coalitions and left to fade in the margins. Those things hurt to witness, but they belonged to the brutal grammar of the savanna. This did not. The patrol team stopped far enough away to avoid forcing the lioness into a final defense. Mara stepped out of the vehicle slowly, one boot touching dust, then the other. Heat pressed down on her hat brim. The air carried the sour smell of still water and something sharper beneath it. A poisoned carcass had a kind of silence around it. So did poisoned water. Beside her, Daniel, the veterinary officer, scanned the pride through a long lens. He did not speak immediately. That was how Mara knew the situation was worse than it looked. Two cubs were still alive, both lying close to Blue Eye's front legs. One was older, perhaps 4 months, with round ears still too large for its head. The other was smaller, its belly tight, its limbs limp in the dust. Every few seconds, the older cub made a weak attempt to lift its head, then dropped it again. Blue Eye bent over them with the unsteady persistence of a mother whose body was failing faster than her instinct. She licked the older cub's face. The cub blinked. She pushed at the smaller one with her muzzle, then stood frozen, as if waiting for a response that would not come. She did not know the word poison. She did not know blame. She knew only that her young were still warm, and warmth meant effort was required. A second patrol vehicle arrived behind them. Then the call went out to the air unit. Antidote kits were loaded at the field station. For fluids, syringes, monitoring equipment, a stretcher, dart rifle, oxygen. Time became the thing they were fighting. Not just poison, not just heat. Time. Every minute under that sun pulled water out of the cubs. Every heartbeat pushed the toxin deeper through small bodies that did not have the strength to resist it. Mara crouched by the vehicle and studied the waterhole. There were hoof prints near the mud. Cow, goat, human boot tracks. Tire marks leading to the service path that ran outside the reserve boundary. She followed those marks with her eyes until they disappeared in the glare. At the edge of the team, a local herder stood with his arms tight against his chest. His name was Tomas. His farm bordered the reserve on the eastern side, where the grassland broke into scrub and grazing land. Mara knew him. She had argued with him at meetings. She had also sat with him once after lions took 6 goats from his kraal in one night. Grief had many faces in a place like this. Sometimes it wore the face of conservation. Sometimes it wore the face of hunger. Tomas did not look toward Mara. He looked toward the water. His jaw worked once, but no words came. Mara saw it then. Not proof, not yet, but a collapse in him that looked too much like recognition. This was not an accident. Blue Eye suddenly lifted her head. Even weakened, she sensed the line of human bodies on the ridge.
Back.
Her lips pulled back.
Apart.
The sound that came out of her was low, cracked, and dangerous. Her legs spread in front of the cubs. Her clouded eye caught the sun and flashed pale. The rangers stepped back. No one blamed her. To Blue Eye, humans did not mean antidote. Humans meant distance, noise, metal, pressure, risk. She had lived long enough to know that the 2-legged animals near the edge of the grass could change the shape of a day. Now they had returned at the worst hour of her life. The older cub shifted again. The small one did not. Daniel lowered his binoculars. His voice was careful. They would need to reach the cubs soon. Mara kept her eyes on Blue Eye. To save the young, they might have to bring the mother down first. And if her heart was already weakened by poison, sedation could finish what the water had started. The helicopter appeared as a black speck over the heat. At the sound of its blades, Blue Eye tried to roar. Only a broken breath came out. The helicopter came in low over the savanna, bending the grass in widening circles. Dust lifted from the dry earth. The vultures rose in irritated spirals. Blue Eye dragged herself half a step forward and stood over the cubs, her body angled toward the noise. She was not strong enough to attack. She was still strong enough to try. Mara watched the lioness brace herself and felt the terrible cruelty of the moment. The animal they needed to save would see the rescue as an assault. The antidote that could keep the cubs alive could not be given from a safe distance. And the mother's last useful strength was now turned against the only people trying to undo the harm. The helicopter settled on a flat patch beyond the rise. A medic jumped down with the orange field case. Another ranger carried fluids. Daniel checked the drug dosage for the dart 3 times, then looked up at Mara. No one wanted the decision, but someone had to hold it. Blue Eye's breathing was shallow. Her tongue showed at the edge of her mouth. Her front legs trembled so hard that dust jumped beneath her paws. If they waited for her to collapse naturally, the cubs might die before the team reached them. If they darted her, her heart might not survive. The rescue had become a choice between two kinds of loss. Tomas stood several yards behind the Rangers, hat in hand now, his face gray beneath the sun. He had come closer without anyone noticing. Mara turned and met his eyes. There are moments when guilt stops hiding. He looked away first, not toward the dead lions, toward the cubs. That was the first crack in him. Mara did not ask him what he had done. Not there. Not with two cubs fading in the dust and a mother lioness standing on a failing heart. Justice could wait for a cooler hour. Medicine could not. Daniel lifted the dart rifle. Blue Eye saw the movement. She gathered herself, stumbled, and bared her teeth. Her clouded eye stared past them, pale and unreadable. Her good eye burned with a wild, focused terror. The first dart could not be too strong. It also could not be too weak. A half-sedated lioness in panic could kill a ranger, crush a cub, or run until her poisoned body collapsed beyond help. The shot broke softly. The dart struck the heavy muscle of her shoulder. Blue Eye flinched hard, spun toward the sting, and almost fell. For one frightening second, she stepped directly onto the loose dirt beside the smaller cub. Mara's whole body tightened, but the cub was just beyond her paw. Blue Eye turned once more toward the humans, swaying. Then she lowered her head over the cubs, as if trying to cover them with the last wall she had left. There is no easy way to explain mercy to a creature in pain. Sometimes mercy arrives carrying fear in its hands. The sedative moved through her bloodstream slowly. Too slowly. Her legs buckled, then straightened. Daniel whispered for her to go down. She did not. The older cub lifted its head one final time and made a dry, soundless call. That small movement changed everything. Blue Eye turned toward the cub. Her body softened for half a breath. Then her knees gave way. She collapsed beside them, not on them. Her head landing in the dust with her clouded eye still open to the white sky. The Rangers moved. Mara ran first. Not recklessly. Never recklessly around lions. But fast enough that the dry grass cracked beneath her boots. Daniel reached Blue Eye's head and checked her breathing. A second ranger positioned himself near her hindquarters. Another moved to the cubs with the antidote kit already open. The heat was merciless. It turned every metal tool hot to the touch. It dried the inside of Mara's mouth. It made the shallow water shine like a sheet of broken glass. Blue Eye's chest rose, paused, rose again. Too shallow. Daniel placed a monitor against her. His face changed. Her pulse was weak. Mara knelt by the older cub. His fur was hot. His gums were pale. The animal's eyes opened halfway, unfocused. She kept her movements low and efficient, one hand steadying the small body, the other clearing space for the injection. No tenderness that wasted time. No panic that made hands clumsy. Only care sharpened into action. The antidote entered through a needle beneath the skin. Then fluids. Then another dose prepared for the smaller cub. The small cub barely reacted. That frightened Mara more than a growl would have. A living body protests. A body near the edge goes quiet. Sometimes the most desperate sound in the wild is not a cry. It is the absence of one. Behind her, Daniel spoke to Blue Eye as if the words were for himself, not the lioness. He adjusted her head to keep the airway open. He checked the gums. He watched her chest, counted seconds, and then reached for medication to support the heart. The mother had survived the dart. Now she had to survive the poison, and the medicine, and the heat, and the human hands around her. Tomas stepped forward with a water can from his truck. Mara looked up sharply. For a second, no one moved. The farmer stood outside the medical circle, shoulders bent, holding the can with both hands like an offering he was not sure he had the right to make. Dust clung to his trousers. His eyes were red, not from tears alone, but from the dry wind and the sight before him. Daniel told him to pour water onto cloths, not into the animals' mouths, onto cloths. Slowly, Tomas obeyed. He knelt at the edge of the shade tarp and soaked the fabric while another ranger laid it near the cubs to cool the ground around them. He did not touch the lions. He did not speak. His hands shook so hard that water spilled into the dust. Mara watched him for 1 second too long. Then the smaller cub convulsed. Its legs stiffened. His jaw opened. Daniel shouted for more fluid. Mara shifted fast, supporting the cub's neck, keeping the body aligned while the medic worked. Blue Eye's tail twitched behind them, a small reflex that made every ranger glance toward her. She remained down, but the sedation was light by necessity. If she rose too soon, they would all be in danger. If they deepened the sedation, she might not wake at all. The older cub began to breathe more strongly. The smaller one did not. For several minutes, the world narrowed to tiny signs. A blink, a pulse, a breath, a swallow, a tremor fading from the paw. The helicopter pilot stood ready to lift the cubs out if field treatment failed. But transport would mean separation from the mother, and separation could mean another kind of loss. Lion cubs can be saved by people and still lose the wild pattern they need to survive. Mara did not want a rescue that became a theft. She wanted them alive beside their mother. Blue Eye's breathing faltered. Daniel leaned over her chest. His hand pressed against the thick fur behind her foreleg, feeling for the heart. He prepared the cardiac medication, then paused, calculating the risk. Too much could shock the system. Too little could do nothing. Mara looked at the lioness's face. Dust had gathered in the fur near her clouded eye. Her mouth was slightly open. Her teeth, so often a symbol of power, looked suddenly fragile. This was the predator people feared. This was also a mother poisoned at her own water. The line between enemy and victim had disappeared in the heat. Daniel gave the medication. Nothing changed. Then Blue Eye took one deeper breath. Another. The monitor answered with a weak but steadier rhythm. No one celebrated. Not yet. The smaller cub's paw flexed against Mara's wrist. A small movement. Almost nothing. But in that hour, almost nothing was enough to keep working. The team treated the cubs again, cooling them with damp cloths near the belly and chest, keeping their heads clear, watching for aspiration, checking their responses every few minutes. The older cub tried to roll toward its mother. Mara let it move only as far as safety allowed. Contact mattered, but so did breathing. When the cub's nose brushed Blue Eye's foreleg, the lioness stirred. A low sound moved in her throat. Every ranger froze. The sound was not a full growl. It was not peace either. It was the body remembering its duty before the mind had returned. Mara slowly withdrew her hand from the cub's side. Daniel checked the timing. The sedation window was closing. They had minutes left. The farmer backed away until he reached the tire of his truck. He sat down hard in the dust, staring at the water hole he had once believed was a boundary between his pain and theirs. Now it was only a mirror. By late afternoon, the sun had shifted enough to lengthen the acacia shadow over Blue Eye's body. The older cub was breathing without assistance. The smaller cub remained weak, but its eyes opened once, dark and unfocused, then closed again. Blue Eye's heart held. The rangers moved back before she could fully wake. They carried the dead away from the water. They marked the site. They collected samples. They covered the contaminated pool. And then, from a distance, they watched the mother return from the dark edge of sedation. Blue Eye lifted her head slowly. Her good eye blinked. Her clouded eye caught the light. She tried to stand, failed, and lowered her head toward the cubs. The older cub pressed against her chin. The smaller one moved closer by inches. Blue Eye did not understand the syringe. She did not understand the arguments of humans or the paperwork that would come after. She did not know that the man sitting in the dust had helped poison the water, then helped cool the ground that kept her cub alive. She only knew that two warm bodies remained beside her. And for that moment, the savanna held its breath. The first night after the poisoning, the rangers stayed on the ridge with spotlights off and engines quiet. They did not want to draw hyenas. They did not want to disturb Blue Eye. They only wanted to know whether morning would find 3 living shapes beneath the acacia. The savanna cooled slowly. Heat left the soil in waves. Insects grew louder. Somewhere beyond the dry drainage line, a jackal called once and was answered by nothing. Blue Eye did not move far. Her body was too weak, but she shifted enough to place herself between the cubs and the open grass. The older cub nursed briefly, then slept. The smaller cub tried, failed, and rested with its head against the lioness's foreleg. Before dawn, Mara saw it lift its head. Only for a second, but enough. By sunrise, Blue Eye was standing, unsteady, thin, and marked by the violence of the previous day, but standing. The 2 cubs were alive beneath her. The wild does not erase what happened. It only asks whether life can continue after it. In the days that followed, the investigation became unavoidable. The water samples confirmed poison. The tire marks led toward the farms. The container was found buried behind a shed, not deep enough to hide from a dog, not far enough to hide from conscience. Tomas confessed before the final report was written. He did not speak like a villain. That made it harder for some people. He spoke like a tired man who had lost animals, lost money, lost sleep, and mistaken revenge for control. None of that excused the poisoned water. It only showed the human wound beneath the human crime. Mara listened without softening the truth. Dead lions were still dead. Pride had been broken. 2 cubs had nearly died because anger had been poured into a place where every living thing came to drink. But punishment alone would not keep the next waterhole clean. So the work became larger than one arrest. Rangers, farmers, and community leaders gathered at the edge of the reserve. They rebuilt the broken fencing near the livestock path. They reinforced crawls. They created a reporting line for predator movement. And beside the old contaminated pool, sealed now and marked, they began construction on a safer well away from the conflict zone, designed for livestock and monitored for wildlife use. Tomas came every day. First, no one welcomed him warmly. He carried posts, dug through hard ground, hauled stone, lowered his eyes when the ranger trucks passed. Some repairs are not ceremonies. Some are repetition. A shovel into earth, a hand on a rope, a fence made stronger, a water source moved farther from fear. Weeks later, Blue Eye was seen again at dusk. She crossed a band of pale grass with the 2 surviving cubs behind her. Her body was lean, and her steps were slower than before, but she moved with purpose. The smaller cub lagged once. Blue Eye stopped, looked back, and waited. The cub caught up. Then all 3 disappeared into the tawny fold of the savanna. Mara lowered her binoculars. No one spoke for a while. There was no perfect ending here. The dead did not return. The poisoned water did not become innocent because a new well was built. The farmer's guilt did not vanish because he chose to help. But somewhere in the harsh country between punishment and repair, something had shifted. A man who had poisoned a well had helped build a safer one. A lioness who had nearly died beside bitter water was still leading her cubs through grass. And the people who lived along the boundary had seen, with painful clarity, that conflict does not end when one side wins. It ends slowly when both sides stop feeding the wound. Forgiveness is a bridge built over the ashes of conflict. It does not deny the fire. It proves that something can still cross after the burning. In the savanna, water is never just water. It is memory. It is promise. It is a test of what humans choose to protect when fear has made them tired. And sometimes, beside a well rebuilt under a merciless sun, the first sign of healing is not a grand gesture. It is a farmer tightening a fence, a ranger checking a track, a lioness pausing for a cub that almost did not live to follow her. What do you believe is harder for people and wildlife to share? The land itself, or the forgiveness needed after harm has already been done? This story leaves us with a difficult lesson. Saving wild animals is not only about medicine, helicopters, and brave rescues. It is also about preventing the next wound before it opens. It is about listening to the people who live beside the wild without excusing harm done to it. It is about turning anger into responsibility before bitterness reaches the water. If the story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more cinematic animal stories about survival, trust, and the fragile bond between humans and the wild, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps these quiet stories travel farther.